What is up, guys? It is Mike from Infotech Unlimited. Today we have a special box from E3D Online. By the title, I'm pretty sure you know what it is. Let's go ahead and take a look. Alright, welcome back, guys. So here's the box from E3D Online. As a bit of a side note, I ordered this as an upgrade for my Prusa i3 Mark III, and I'm hoping that the upgrades live up to the hype. But let's go ahead and get started. Okay, as I struggle to get this box open, there we go. Okay, so right out of the box, we have some Unicorn PTFE tubing, and I believe it was about 2 feet that was included. And as you'll notice, the first thing that I noticed was the inner diameter was just a bit smaller than your standard PTFE tubing. By comparison, let me give you guys a bit of a side-by-side comparison here. It's not greatly noticeable, but there is a bit of a difference, and I believe it does help feed the filament a little bit better. Next up is the Titanium Heatbreak. I've heard great things about this. Supposedly it's supposed to be able to dissipate some of that heat transfer that's going on from the heater block up to the heat sink. We'll see how effective it is, but on a side note, it is pretty pricey, but I figure since it's for the Prusa, might as well. Next up we have a box of PETG by Spoolworks. This specific filament is actually called Blue 22 Oxford. And I used this stuff before. It's a really nice quality, and I enjoy it. Looks fantastic. And next up, okay, in this package we have the Special Edition Gold Anodized Heatsink, the 1.75mm stainless steel heat break, the 1.75mm by 0.4mm hardened steel V6 nozzle, and the plated copper heat block, as well as a collet for both direct drive and boat-in, along with some heatsink compounds, some hardware, and the hex wrenches to be able to assemble everything together. Pretty well packaged too. And next up, in this package we have the thermistor cartridge, the 30 by 30 by 10mm fan in either 12 volt or 24 volt, 2 connector cables, a 30-watt high-precision heater cartridge, which is also in 12 volt or 24 volt, and a fiberglass insulated heater connector cable. And interestingly enough, a nice little heat sock for the heater block, something that wasn't included with my Prusa. Well, that's about it. Looks like an empty box. Let's go ahead and get that out of the way. And now let's go ahead and grab the hot end parts and take a look at what we're going to be working with. I seriously cannot get over how nice this heatsink looks. Before we start, I just want to note, I'm very impressed with the build quality of all these parts. E3D has definitely stepped up their game, and the E3D V6 Gold Edition does not disappoint. Okay, now let's go ahead and jump over to the E3D website and take a look at this hot end and the specifications. Just from the pictures you can really see that build quality shine. I mean, it definitely stands out. And interestingly enough, it includes some accessories that were not included with my Prusa. So as I stated before, you have the option of ordering it in either 12 volt or 24 volt, depending on the power supply that you run your printer with. And let's go ahead and go over some of these specs real quick. So again, you get the golden heat sink, the heater block, the hardened steel nozzle, the heater cartridge, and a see-through fan duct, which is pretty nice because I think usually they come in black. So depending on what kind of printer you're using, that see-through fan duct is pretty nice, but on the Prusa i3 Mark III, you're just not going to see it. The PTFE guide was a nice little add-on. Interestingly enough, when you purchase this kit, it includes 2 different types of connectors. You can either go direct drive or boat-in, which was very nice. I mean, sometimes you have to order these parts separately, but with this specific configuration, everything is included. Another cool little inclusion was the Capricorn PTFE tubing. That stuff is really nice and actually has a tighter tolerance than your standard PTFE tube, which allows for a better filament feed into the hot end. And while you would think it's a very small little upgrade, there is a noticeable difference. So I know we already opened up the box and saw what was in it, but let's go ahead and take a second look. Again, you're getting the special gold anodized heatsink, you're getting the stainless steel heat break, you're getting the hardened steel nozzle, the plated copper heat block, the thermistor cartridge, your fan, your 2 table connectors, your 30-watt high precision heater cartridge, the fiberglass insulated heater connector cable, the fan duct, the silicone sock, all the extra little bonuses. And without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the build of this thing. So, first things first, let's go ahead and open up the packaging that contains your heatsink, your heat block, the hardware, and the compound. I find it to be a lot easier to actually lay out the parts in the order that the instructions tell you to build, to make it a little less confusing when you're having to disassemble and reassemble. Because I'm using the titanium heat break, I will not be using the heat break that is included with the kit. So let's go ahead and take out the heatsink, set that aside. Alright, so grabbing that titanium heat break, let's go ahead and set that down. Now first things first, always refer to the instructions if you're not sure which way this should be assembled. But as you can see from my PTFE tube, I have a slight notch in the top. Later I revised that as I also changed my extruder carriage, and it wasn't really too effective. I know it's supposed to be, but I was still having some major issues with my flex, so this may work for you, it may not, but in any case, this step is not vitally important. What is vitally important is that you give it the 45-degree angle cut on the bottom side of the PTFE tube, which I failed to do here, but the reason why you do that is so that it sits in the heat break and creates a good connection between it and the walls. You don't want a little gap going on in between where the PTFE tube is going in and where the filament's going to be going through the bottom part of that heat break into your heater block. Now looking at the heater block, you have 2 slots on the sides and then 2 screw holes on the bottom. Well, actually 3 screw holes if you want to include the hardened steel nozzle. Okay, so let's go ahead and set that down and grab up the bag that has our hardened steel nozzle, the PTFE clamp, and the collet clip connector, which holds the PTFE clamp in place, which seemed to have been missing from the E3D V6 that was included with the Prusa. So the first thing you want to do is you're going to grab your nozzle and make sure that E3D is facing up, or that your heater cartridge hole is closer to the bottom. And you're going to thread this in all the way in. You're going to bottom it out, and then you're going to loosen it up exactly a half of a turn. This will allow you to create a better connection between it and the heat break when you put them together. So once it's nice and tight, as you can see right there, it's kind of bottomed out, you're going to loosen it about a half a turn. Okay, once you have it rotated about a half a turn loose, you'll see a small gap between the nozzle and the heat block. This is going to be a very important step, so keep that in mind. You're going to then take your heat break right here, and notice that you have a little notch in it. You want the notch with the smaller portion of the threads going into the heat block. No heater compound is required here, as the temperatures will literally just cook that, and it will just don't do it. So once this is in finger tight, you don't want to go too crazy. You're going to get a spanner wrench or any type of wrench, and then you're going to use that to actually tighten the nozzle into the heater block so that it makes great contact with the heat break. Now this step is pretty important. While you do want to snug it in, you do not want to over torque it. You just want to mate it until that you can feel there's a connection between the heat break and the nozzle. Okay, before we move any further, go ahead and double check your work. Make sure that the nozzle is indeed a half a turn still, and that the heat break is mated correctly. You'll notice that it kind of flushes out with the heat block, which is very important. If everything checks out and everything looks good, you should be able to set it down and move on to the next step, which is grabbing up the bag of electronics and getting ready. So kind of remove everything from the bag just to kind of keep it a little organized. And the first thing you're going to grab is the thermistor, because that's a little bit easier to help kind of configure the way that you're going to be installing it. While I'm sure many printers are different, the E3D V6 to the Prusa i3 Mark III requires you to run the wires out of the left side when facing the E3D V6 towards you, because what it does is it's going to loop around the side and then towards the back following the cable management. Alright, the next step is going to be getting your grub screw and your smaller Allen wrench, and you're going to carefully feed it into the hole just underneath the thermistor cartridge. Now, the key point here is you do not want to over tighten this. You want to carefully tighten it just to the point towards making contact. You do not want to crush the glass that is located inside of the metal sleeve. So just tighten it until you can feel the resistance and know that it's not going to fall out, but don't tighten it to the point to where you're crushing the thermistor. Alright, so the next step is the heater cartridge, and again you want to follow the same rule of thumb. You're going to be following the same path that you did with the thermistor, but what's very important here is to make sure that you have even distribution of the cartridge between both sides. As you can see right here, you have a little bit protruding on each side. Now with this, you can tighten a little bit more than you did with the thermistor, but again, you don't want to crush it, so just enough to be able to clamp down on the cartridge itself. After installing the cartridge, just inspect your work, make sure that everything's snug, tight, and to spec. So, once everything checks out, get your heater compound and apply it liberally around the threads on your heat break that are going to be going into the heat sink. This is vital. This will help alleviate a lot of the heat transfer that will be obviously creeping up if it doesn't have a way to dissipate the heat into the heatsink itself. Okay, so after a liberal application of heatsink, you're going to kind of insert it into your heat sink just a little bit, and then you're going to put in your collet and then unscrew it so that you have a little bit of the heat compound already in there. And then what I do is I insert the PTFE tube from the top. I kind of protrude it out the bottom a little bit. You don't have to worry about this because as you thread it, it's going to fit directly into your heat break as so, making sure that it makes complete contact with the bottom. And as you're screwing it on, you're going to want to hold that retaining clip down because it's going to keep the PTFE tube from pulling out. So this part can be a little tricky, but just hold the clip down and you shouldn't have any problems threading it on while also retaining the position of the PTFE tube in that heat break. So continue to work at it slowly while holding down that little clip, and then once it begins to bottom out, just give it a little bit more of a twist, but again, do not over tighten it. It just needs to be tight enough to create a contact and to prevent seepage of your filament. After you've tightened everything down, give it a double check, just make sure that everything is firm. Again, don't over tighten, you're just checking to make sure that it's seated. Make sure that your PTFE tube is properly inside of the heat break itself. And again, this is kind of imperative. Make sure to double, triple, and quadruple check your work. Make sure that everything's still in place. Don't pull too hard, but just make sure that everything's inspected because you don't want to have to repeat this job again once it's installed in your printer. Once you've completed your inspection, you want to carefully route the wires in the direction that you're going to need them to go in order to make contact with the connectors that feed into the PCB on your printer. What's very important here is that while you're zip tying the wires together, make sure that you give the thermistor just a little bit of slack. The wire is fragile, and if there's too much tension on it, it will likely break on you. So use some caution here. Don't go too tight. Just make sure that everything's strapped together and going the direction that you need it to go. Once everything goes well, snip your cable tie, but do not snip your wires. Once you've completed that step, do a double check again over all of your work. Verify that everything looks good. Verify that the nozzle indeed still has the gap in between it and the heater block. Make sure that you have equal spacing on both sides for your heater cartridge. You don't want uneven heating. Make sure that your thermistor is properly seated, the wires are facing the way that you need them. Once everything is completed, you can go ahead and grab that collet clip. And what you're going to do is kind of hold down on the PTFE tube while you lift up on the black retainer. Just enough, don't force it. It should pop up on its own. You're going to slip this collet clip under the black connector, and what this prevents is for your PTFE tube from sliding in and out of the hot end, which I've noticed some people have been having this issue when they have retractions. It will tend to start to pull the PTFE tube out, and therefore you are more than likely to have a clog later on down the road. So all in all, I think this build was relatively simple, and I feel that anybody can put this together if they follow the instructions correctly. For those of you who are adept with this kind of thing, you may be able to pull it off without the instructions, but as they say, it's better to be safe than sorry. You're working with a lot of really delicate parts. The thermistor's delicate, your heat break is delicate, the way that you angle cut your PTFE tube is delicate. All of these little factors contribute to how well your printer is going to be able to print after you upgrade to this hot end. So do I recommend this hot end? While the price is a little bit higher than their average E3D V6, I feel that the build quality is superior, and while I won't be reviewing this product yet because I want to be able to put it to the test and kind of give you some examples of its print quality, I am very happy with the build and the assembly. It was not difficult at all, and if you are thinking about buying this hot end and are worried that you're not going to be able to assemble it, the instructions are very clear, it's very easy to follow, and I don't see any issues with you being able to complete this project. I will be leaving links to all of these products in the descriptions if you are interested in purchasing them, but I want to thank you for taking the time to come check out my video, and if you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, and hit that bell to get notified for more videos that I'll be putting out. Anyways, thanks guys, looking forward to seeing you in the next one.